begin with Dana White clearly dodging a simple question about Tom Aspinall's eye and whether a rematch is being discussed. But instead of giving a clear update, Dana noticeably hesitates. His response comes out scattered, almost defensive, as he jokes about not being allowed to talk about Aspinall's condition. He mentions a second procedure, but can't even clarify whether it's surgery or injections, which only adds to the confusion. The narrator highlights how unusual this is, especially considering Dana is typically blunt when injuries aren't serious. What stands out most is Dana referencing past backlash, implying that something he said before caused problems. That alone raises eyebrows. The silence doesn't feel accidental, it feels calculated. The narrator frames this as a classic UFC move. When details are vague, it's often because the situation is worse than they want to admit. Aspinall didn't even fight that night, yet he's somehow part of the post-fight drama, catching attention without stepping into the octagon. That contradiction sets the tone for the rest of the video. The focus then shifts to Tom Aspinall himself, who reacts to the clip on his own YouTube channel. On the surface, he plays it off with humor, joking about catching strays from Dana White while sitting in his living room. But the narrator points out that the jokes don't quite hide the frustration underneath. Aspinall doesn't offer clarity either. He doesn't confirm a timeline, doesn't shut down speculation, and doesn't reassure fans the way fighters usually do when an injury is minor. Instead, there's a sense of uncertainty hanging over everything he says. The narrator emphasizes how telling that is. When fighters know they'll be back soon, they say it confidently. When they don't, the language gets vague. Aspinall's reaction ends without answers, leaving viewers wondering how serious the eye issue actually is and how long he could be sidelined. The video subtly suggests that long layoffs are career killers in divisions like heavyweight, especially when titles and interim belts are involved. The uncertainty doesn't just affect Aspinall, it impacts the entire title picture, and that unanswered tension carries straight into the next storyline. The tone shifts sharply as the narrator introduces Arman Tsarukyan's reaction to Paddy Pimblett's loss. Unlike Dana or Aspinall, Arman holds nothing back. He openly questions Paddy's game plan, mocking the decision to stand and trade instead of wrestling. The narrator highlights how brutal the criticism is, especially when Arman straight up calls Paddy a trash can. This isn't playful trash talk, it's dismissive and personal. What makes it worse is the context. Paddy had just taken a serious beating, and Arman's comments feel like salt in the wound. The narrator explains why this moment matters. It exposes the growing gap between fan hype and fighter reality. While fans admire Paddy's toughness, elite contenders see exploitable flaws. Arman's comments also reignite debate about whether he himself has been overlooked for bigger opportunities. Despite being one of the most dangerous fighters in the division, he's still on the outside looking in. The narrator frames this as frustration boiling over, not just trash talk for clicks, and it leads directly into bigger questions about who the UFC chooses to push.
Next, the narrator turns to Dustin Poirier, whose retirement suddenly doesn't feel very final. After Justin Gaethje's win, a social media post claiming Gaethje has a better resume than Poirier sparks a reaction. When Poirier responds by saying he'd come back for that fight, it immediately grabs attention. The narrator points out how common this has become in modern MMA. Fighters retire only to get pulled back in by the right matchup. In Poirier's case, it doesn't feel planned or strategic, it feels emotional. There's unfinished business, pride, and history involved. The narrator questions whether the UFC even wants to book it, especially on a high-profile White House card. Nostalgia fights bring attention, but they also come with risk. The segment subtly asks what retirement even means anymore in the UFC. Is it an ending or just a pause until the itch comes back? That uncertainty mirrors a bigger trend across the promotion. The video then pivots to fighter pay, one of the most sensitive topics in the sport.
The narrator explains the UFC's new bonus structure, highlighting the increased fight and performance bonuses, along with new finish bonuses. At first, it sounds like a win for fighters, but things get complicated when Dana White reveals that discretionary bonuses had existed for years behind the scenes. Fighters like Matt Frivola start posting receipts, proving those bonuses were real. The narrator emphasizes how quickly the conversation shifts from celebration to suspicion. Fans begin asking why this information was never transparent. Others question whether removing discretionary bonuses could actually hurt fighters in the long run. The segment touches on how tense the relationship between fighters and the UFC always is when money comes up. With a massive Paramount deal now in place, the narrator suggests this might be the beginning of a much bigger shift, or an even bigger fight over guaranteed pay. Attention then turns to a brewing flyweight rivalry. What starts as a casual social media jab quickly spirals into a heated exchange between Joshua Van and Menel Cape. The narrator walks through how Van references a potential rematch, only for Cape to fire back, claiming Van only got his opportunity because of Cape's injury. The insults escalate fast, moving from competitive trash talk to personal attacks. The narrator stresses how real the animosity feels. This isn't manufactured beef. It's resentment built over missed opportunities and replacement politics. Injuries, timing, and bad luck have shaped both careers, and now they're colliding. With the division lacking a clear contender while the champion recovers, the narrator suggests this fight feels inevitable. When it happens, it won't just be about rankings, it'll be about pride. The narrator then zooms out to the broadcast itself. UFC 324 marks the beginning of the UFC's new Paramount era, and not everyone is happy. Fans immediately notice ads running during walkouts and even between rounds. The pacing feels slow, dragging the energy down. Complaints flood social media, forcing UFC executive Zach Candido to respond. He admits the debut had issues and promises improvements. The narrator remains skeptical. While less yapping sounds good, ads aren't going anywhere. Dana White even addresses it bluntly, reminding fans that everyone needs to make money. The segment frames this as the growing pain of a bigger partnership, but also a warning sign. The UFC may have less control than before, and fans are the first to feel it. The focus shifts back to the fighters as Natalia Silva's name enters the conversation. After stepping in on short notice and beating Rose Namajunas, Silva claims she was promised a title shot. The narrator explains why this matters. Short notice wins usually don't guarantee anything, yet Silva speaks with confidence. She even ties the opportunity to her birthday and the White House card, adding emotional weight. When Dana White later confirms the promise was real, it's a rare moment of validation. Still, the narrator reminds viewers that UFC promises often change. Injuries, timing, and politics can flip plans overnight. Silva may be next, or she may be another name waiting longer than expected. The narrator then brings in Robert Whittaker's warning to Justin Gaethje. While Gaethje just won, Whittaker openly says Ilia Topuria is on another level. He breaks down Ilia's striking, timing, and ability to punish mistakes. The narrator emphasizes how concerning this is, especially since Gaethje absorbed massive damage against Petty. Gaethje responds calmly, trusting his team and game plan, but the narrator highlights the doubt creeping in. Can Gaethje afford that kind of damage against someone like Ilia? And with uncertainty around when Ilia will return, even the belt itself feels unstable. The discussion circles back to Paddy Pimblett, but this time with a broader lens. The narrator explains how the loss reignited criticism that Paddy jumped levels too fast. Veterans point out his refusal to wrestle despite having a clear advantage. Demetrius Johnson's analysis reinforces that idea, questioning Paddy's decision-making under pressure. The narrator makes it clear this isn't about heart. No one doubts Paddy's toughness. It's about growth. The beating he took forces a serious question. Does he need to step back before moving forward again? The loss may not define him, but it definitely exposed areas that can't be ignored. The video closes with concern turning into cautious relief. After days of silence, Paddy's wife shares an update, assuring fans he's okay. A photo shows them together, his face hidden. The narrator explains why the silence worried people. Paddy absorbed over 140 significant strikes, and hospital visits are never a good sign. While the injuries appear cosmetic, the narrator hints that damage isn't always visible. Recovery isn't just physical, it's mental. The video ends by wishing Paddy well, while quietly questioning how this fight might change his approach moving forward.